Hey, this is Steve. I'm setting up a new machine to do the videos for my channel. The operating system that I chose to use is Linux, and I'm using the Gnome or Gnome desktop environment on Linux. The reason why I want to do that is it's kind of a challenge to myself to see if I can do this all with open source software. I really like the Kdenlive video editor, so I'm going to be using that really very much like Linux and the Gnome environment. It works very well for the way I work. For those of you that are coming over from Windows to Linux, Linux is the operating system, and then on top of Linux you have different environments you can use. Probably the two best known ones are GNOME and KDE, but there's tons and tons of other ones, and if you're just coming over, I really recommend that you try different ones. There's some that are geared directly to helping transition from other operating systems to Linux much easier. There's even one called Elementary OS that looks very much like the Mac OS if you're coming from a Mac. So I'm going to kind of walk through my setup that works well for my workflow for GNOME, and hopefully this helps other people see what can be configured and help them configure things if they're not sure how to install things. So the first thing that you should do with any operating system really is when you install it, go out and do your updates. So I'm going to jump to a terminal window, and there's different ways to do things in Linux. You can do a lot of things through an application and just click a button to go out and search for updates. The way I prefer to do it is through the terminal. I'm just kind of keyboard centric and like to do everything through here. So the first thing I want to do though is change the preferences for this terminal window. I kind of like a little transparency. So I'm going to go into the profile preferences in the color and just click this use transparent background. I don't want it fully transparent. I don't want it not transparent at all. So I'm going to put it kind of a third of the way up here, maybe a quarter, because I still want to be able to see the background show through, but I want to be able to see my text clearly. So this works pretty well for me. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And I'm using the Ubuntu distribution, which is based on Debian. So I'm going to do a sudo apt get update. What update does is it goes out and looks through the different repositories, which are basically the software sources, and kind of builds a list of what's available. It'll add things to your list that are new since the last time you did an update and remove things that are no longer available. This doesn't actually install anything, it just refreshes the list of available applications. So after you do an update, you can either do an upgrade or a dist-upgrade. An upgrade is a little bit safer because it won't remove anything or update anything that's not related to the package. If you do a dist-upgrade, it's going to possibly remove things and update things that are dependencies for some of the packages. So if you just install the operating system and this is the first time you're doing the upgrade, I recommend that you do a dist upgrade. Dist upgrades are not necessarily bad, but they're a little riskier when you start getting a lot of things installed that it could break something. All right. So you may have noticed that I'm starting a lot of things with sudo, sudo. Sudo is a way to tell Linux that you want to run something as root rights, which in the Windows world, that's equivalent to administrator rights. So it's kind of like in Windows, if you would right click on an application and tell it to run as administrator, that's what adding sudo before the command does. So two things that I'm going to be using quite a bit are Plank, which is a macOS style dock that kind of goes in the bottom of the screen, down in the bottom center or wherever you want it to go. So I'm going to install that. And then if something's not available in these software sources and you need to download it, you would want to download a DEB or because Ubuntu is based on Debian, it's a Debian package. The software application that comes with version 16.04 of Ubuntu has a little trouble with some of those packages that you download. So I'm going to install Kde, which is another package installer, but it's not as anal as the Software Center is. So I'm going to go ahead and install that one. It's a real small application. All right. So once those are installed, the next thing I want to do is I use a lot of shortcut keys, and there's two in particular that I like. And I've spent most of my life in the Windows world, so I've gotten used to these shortcuts. And that's Windows E to open up kind of a file explorer. And then I also like to do the Windows T to open up a terminal window, because I use terminals quite a bit too. So I'm going to jump into the activities screen here, and I'm just going to start typing in shortcuts. It brings up keyboard because it knows that the shortcut options are within the keyboard application here. And it looks like it opened on my other screen, so I'm just going to move that back up to my main screen here and change my shortcut. So home folder, that's what opens the file explorer. I'm just going to hold down the Windows key and do an E. And for the terminal, Windows T. So there's those two are now set. One thing I really like about Linux and GNOME especially is how configurable it is to your different needs, and even visually, even if it doesn't really impact your workflow. This distribution, this is Ubuntu Gnome. It comes with the tweak tool for the GNOME tweak tool. So I'm going to go in here, and some things that I like to do is I like to set these windows that are light right now. I'd like to have a darker theme. So I'm going to click that dark theme. It doesn't impact any of the windows that are open, and it won't fully go into effect until I log out and log back in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I'm back in, and you can see I have this dark theme. My white terminal window is now dark. So I'm going to go back into the tweak tool because there's a few other things I want to do in there. You may have noticed, but there's a button to close the windows. There's an X, but there's no minimize or maximize buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and change that and turn those on in the Windows section here. I'm just going to turn on the maximize and the minimize. So you see we have both those buttons now. I'm also a guy that likes icons on my desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and turn those on and set these defaults. I like having all those on there. The next thing I really like about this desktop environment is the extensions. The extensions are a way to extend the functionality of the environment and change the way things function. Some of them are built in here, and you have the ability to download others. For instance, this application menu. Up in the corner right now we have activities. Click on that, it takes us to this activities window. But if we want a more traditional application menu, it's as simple as clicking that on. The activities got replaced with application, and now we have this categorized application menu. We can also get back into activities by hitting the Windows key or just moving the mouse into the top left corner here, and that brings us back here. So we didn't lose any functionality, but we gained an application menu, if that's your kind of thing. There's several other really good extensions that are in here. There's two other that I use very often that are not currently in here. So I'm going to click on Get More Extensions, and that's going to open up Firefox and bring you to the GNOME extension site. Now, the first time you launch this, it's going to come up and it's going to say the extension's not active, and then it's going to ask you if you want to allow the website to run the extension. Go ahead and click yes, and then tell it to run it all the time, or else you won't be able to install the extensions from here. So two of the extensions that I use quite a bit are top icons. And the one quirk of the dark theme is that the dark theme makes the text white. So when, if I type text up here, it's white. Well, on some web pages, these input boxes are white. So you have white text on white input box. You can't see what you're typing. So I'm going to use this top icons plus. And to install it, all you do is you click the button. It'll download it, install it, and activate it, and off you go. So what this does is, by default, GNOME will have, if applications have notifications, like Steam is a common one, where you have the Steam icon, and then you can click on Steam and you can jump into some of your games or jump to your friends list. It puts those down on an expandable tray down in the left-hand corner by default. I really like having them up at the top here, and that's what this extension does. It moves them from down in the corner here and just puts them on the top bar up here. So I'm going to go back into extensions, and the other one that I like to use is weather. So this open weather will add a weather link up at the top here next to the time. So we're going to install that. And so it's shown up in here. So if we click on the link, it shows us, all our weather condition. This is not my current location. I'll go and update that later. But since we're up near the top here, the next thing I like to do is the clock. I don't like the 24-hour format. So I'm going to go and change that, and I'm just going to do that by going into the activities screen and start typing clock and bring that up, and then just click this time format for 24-hour to AM PM, and that updates that. So now I am going to start getting my environment set up. I'm going to launch Plank that we installed earlier, and I don't want to have to launch that manually every time I log in, so I'm going to add that as a startup application. So again, I'm going to go into activities, start typing in startup applications, select that, and then I'm just going to add an entry. I'll call it Plank and Plank. And one thing to keep in mind if you're not familiar with Linux is that when you run a command, it's case sensitive. So if I were to type in capital P L-A-N-K, it wouldn't run Plank because it doesn't know what a capital P L-A-N-K is. It only knows what all lowercase Plank is. This name up here is arbitrary. You can call that whatever you want. So case doesn't matter there. But when you're running the command, it does matter. So I'm going to add that and close. And next time I log in, Plank will launch automatically. So next thing I want to do is install Kdenlive. So this is the application that I am going to be using the majority of the time. It's a really good open source video editor. It's based on the KDE libraries. And what that means is, I need to install the repository. So Kdenlive is not one of the things that's in the repository by default, or at least not the most recent version. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to the Kdenlive site, and they have some information on what repository to use to add to your system. So I'm going to go into this Ubuntu one, and I want to add this PPA. So a PPA is just another software source that you can add to your available sources, and this is one that you can manually set up on your system. So I'm going to do a sudo apt add repository, and then I am just going to paste that in. So that'll set up that repository on our system. So we can do a sudo apt get update. We want to update our available software because now that we have a new repository, we're going to have new software available to us. Okay, so now I want to do a sudo apt get install Kdenlive. Now, one thing I've noticed is that sometimes when you install Kdenlive in Gnome, when the first time you launch it, some of the icons will be missing. Actually, all the icons will be missing, and there's no themes available. The reason for that is Kdenlive is built really for KDE, so it uses a lot of the KDE libraries, and that's a different desktop environment. So by default, those libraries are not installed when you install Gnome. So Kdenlive is installed right now. So I'm going to go ahead and launch it, and we'll see if the icons and things are missing. So yeah, there's supposed to be a bunch of icons up along top here. You can see them highlight as I hover over them, and along the sides here. And if we go into settings and then themes, we only have the default theme, which doesn't really work for me with my dark theme installed. So I'm going to go and install those libraries. It takes up a little bit of space, but it's not a huge deal. And then we'll get those buttons and the themes back. So I'm going to do a sudo apt get install Kde Runtime. So this is part of the default repositories that are installed by default when you do the installation of this distribution. So I didn't have to add any extra repositories for that. So it's going to go through and download these and unpack them and install them. All right, so there we go. Those libraries are installed. So let's go ahead and open Kdenlive again, and we will see if we have icons. So yeah, so now we have these icons along the top. We have all the ones on the sides, and we should be able to set a dark theme now. Yep, we have the Breeze Dark, which works really well. Go ahead and install that, and there we have it. So now there's another couple of applications that I use quite a bit. One of them is Audacity. That's an audio editing program. So I'm going to go and install Audacity. Oh, and I forgot the install before the command. So sudo apt-get install Audacity. So you may have noticed when I forgot the install, I didn't have to retype the whole line. I was able to get back to the last command that I typed real quickly and then just add the install. And the way you do that is with the up arrow to go back through the last few commands and the down arrow to go forward through the last few commands. And that's a way to really quickly get back to anything you typed before if you made a typo. Now the last thing that I want to install, and I'll probably get some flack for this, but it's Chrome. I like Chrome. I like the official Chrome, not Chromium, and I am going to get the DEB, the deb file. If you're on Fedora or OpenSUSE, you want to get the RPM because that's the packages they use, but Debian and anything based on Debian, like Ubuntu, and anything based on Ubuntu downstream uses these DEB files. So I'll go ahead and accept that. I want to save it. Okay, so Chrome just finished downloading, so I'm going to do my shortcut to jump out to the File Explorer. I'm going to go to Downloads, and here's our DEB file. So by default, it opens with the software application, and like I mentioned before, the software application that comes with it sometimes has trouble with the deb files that you've downloaded from the internet and not through one of the repositories. So I am going to go and set the default. Oh, it looks like the default is already set to Kde. If it is set for software install or software, it's only a matter of selecting the application you want to use and setting that as default. But since it's already set at Kde for me, I'm going to leave that. So I'm going to open this up. It's going to go through and validate the package and check dependencies and things like that and give us an option to install in just a second. All right. And in the dock, you'll notice that there's a bunch of applications here, and some of them have this blue dot under them. Plank functions the same as pretty much any other dock, where when you launch an application, it adds it into the dock, and then when you close it, like when I close out of GW here, it drops it out. If you want anything to stay in, like I'll want Chrome in just a second here, then it's just a matter of right-clicking on the application and choosing to keep it in the dock. There's a lot of other things you can do with Plank. You can set up folders with applications inside it, very similar to stacks in OS X. That's a little trickier to do. It's not in the default settings, but I think I'm going to do another video on that. I don't want to try to tackle that in this video. But as far as this video goes, that is about it. This environment is set up for me now. As I mentioned before, I really like GNOME. It works well with my workflow. I'm very keyboard centric, and this works well for that. For instance, if I want to launch Chrome, I can click it in the dock here, but I can launch it very quickly by hitting the Windows key, starting to type Chrome. I didn't even have to type the whole thing, and I just launch it. If I want to launch another terminal, I can do the same thing. Oh, it brought me back to the same one, but let me close that down. I just start typing TER and hit enter, and it launches immediately. It's very fast to launch an application through the activities window, or you can add them to your dock. You can add them to the desktop, however you want to handle it. But I hope you found this video informative and helpful, especially if you're coming from Windows to Linux and giving it a shot. If you have any other videos that you want to see, please feel free to send me some ideas. I have a few things lined up to populate my channel, but I'm always open to ideas. And if you liked the video or found it entertaining or informative, please like and subscribe, and I'll be trying to put out new videos pretty regularly. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.